Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. This is the big conversation. This is the great debate. But only if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls on 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back. Establish a clear line. And remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be at 0 or no one will understand either of us. You can SMS the show on 447800008066 or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. As the Nakba 65th anniversary approaches, 65 years since the catastrophe that wiped Palestine off the map began the stampede of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians off their land, out of their houses, most of which were then systematically destroyed. In a wave of Zionist terror, the Nakba was 65 years ago. It's a long time, but there's still a remarkable number of Palestinians who lived through it are still alive. I was in a Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut just yesterday, talking to old men and women who had lived through that day, 65 years ago, when the first of the catastrophes began. But they make the point that it's almost every day a kind of Nakba, a kind of catastrophe. And so it has turned out again this week, this time on the West Bank as well as in Gaza. Mosques have been attacked, refugees have been attacked, people have been murdered on the West Bank, and they're once again bombarding the Gaza Strip. The talk is, amongst Palestinians outside, I haven't spoken to any inside for a few weeks or so, but on the outside, the talk everywhere is that something has to change. After all, just this very week, a couple of kings, appointed by no one in the Palestinian arena, were offering to swap the land of Palestine with Israel as yet another new Arab quote-unquote peace plan. Well, it's not likely to lead to peace because it won't lead to any justice. And this evening, two of the Palestinian resistance movements have denounced it. But they're going to have to denounce it a little more dramatically than merely issuing a press release. Is a Palestinian intifada imminent? Discuss. And Dave Cameron, the British Prime Minister, today said that, and I quote him, "We have paid a high price in Afghanistan." He was talking in the wake of the death of another 3 young Scottish soldiers, this time, who were blown up by an IED in their heavily armoured vehicle as it patrolled on the outskirts of Kandahar. You'll remember Kandahar, Helmand province. That's where the British Defence Minister, Dr. John Reid, now Lord Reid, said that the British forces would go, and he hoped they would go and be withdrawn in due course without a shot fired in anger. Well, the number of British dead now stands at 444. It was 2 when Britain went into Helmand province. And there's no sign of it slowing up. The Afghan resistance have announced the beginning of what they call their spring offensive. So hold on to your hats and your heads. It's going to be a long, hot summer in Afghanistan for the foreign occupation forces, who've already decided to leave and are already negotiating with the people to whom they're going to leave Afghanistan, the very people they've been fighting for these last 11 years. So what is the point of more British soldiers giving their lives, of more Afghans being killed by the foreign soldiers and their air force and drone attacks? What is the point? I'm only asking. Mohsen's on the line in London. He wants to talk about Israel. Mohsen, welcome.
Hi, George. I think because I just felt that I want to talk about the British forces in Afghanistan. basically, I spoke to a number of people. They say the fight is in Afghanistan. It's totally useless. But even the soldiers, they said that they don't know about what they're doing over there. And I have a sympathy with the soldiers' families.
Who's going to be the last man to die, Mohsen? Who wants to be the last man to die in a war, the end of which we already have a date for? The conditions for the end of it have already been announced. So what is the point of more deaths?
Yeah, and because I want to mention one point about this David Cameron comments. And if you can see on the back in the days, and when this Tony Blair took to going to the war in Iraq, and even the Labour Party, they didn't give the votes. And the Conservative Party, they give the votes, and that's the bill improved, and then go to the... And I want to ask the same question to Mr. Cameron as well. He's supporting at the moment in Syria, and they're sending weapons and all kind of things. Why not they can have this huge amount of money they spend on the people who already lost their lives, and people who are disabled, and people who really need in Britain. And secondly, the war in Afghanistan, in the British forces, the first duty is for the cut the narcotics. They have to prevent there's no more affion or no more cocaine. But is
heroin? It's heroin. Mohsen, thanks for the
heroin.
call. The heroin production in the Helmand province, which is the main centre of heroin production, which has been under British rule for the best part of a decade, heroin production's up 800%. Welcome. Thanks, Mohsen. Paul's on the line. He's in the north of Ireland. He wants to talk about Israel-Palestine. Paul, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, George, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about Israel and what's going on in Syria at the minute.
Yeah, go on.
And I can just see, I can see the Golan Heights. I can see another land grab going to happen if the conflict keeps going the way it is. I can see the Golan Heights. There's going to be a land grab by Israel, and they're going to probably under the tag of like a buffer zone or another land. You know what I mean?
Well, they already hold the Golan Heights, of course. They have not just occupied them; they have annexed them. Claiming that the Golan Heights is now a part of Israel. But you're right in saying this. Israel has become ever more involved in the war in Syria. It has bombed several times. It has helped facilitate both medical services and channels for the running of guns to some of the most extreme Islamist factions existing anywhere in the world. You couldn't quite make that up, but that's what's happening, Paul.
Yeah. It's very sad to see the sectarian conflict as well, like, you know, between the Muslims killing each other, like.
Well, I think the Muslim world is divided between sectarians and non-sectarians. There are sectarians in all segments of society, and there are non-sectarians in all segments of Muslim society. And it's time, if there has to be a dichotomy, the dichotomy should be between those who turn their backs on sectarianism, who believe in unity, whether unity of the Arabs, unity of the Muslims, unity of humanity against the enemies of humanity, and let the others choose their side. Paul, thanks for that call. Harun's on the line all the way from Nigeria. He wants to talk about the same subject. Harun, welcome.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you.
Yeah. So I would like to, about what Israel are doing, killing Palestinians, is not good.
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, Judge.
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
I get matter. And
No, we'll have to move on, Harun, because the line's just not good enough. My apologies to you. Glenn is in Portsmouth in England on Palestine. Glenn, welcome back to the show.
Nice to talk to you again. The subject I would like to talk on is the subject of Israel.
Yes.
I think it's an example the crass and extreme double standards, the hypocrisy of U.S. foreign policy, that Israel, you never hear one objection from the United States about Israel's nuclear program. It's always having a dig at Iran.
Indeed. It's accepted that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, but has never declared them, doesn't allow any inspections of them, refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and refuses to obey international law. And instead of being punished, she's rewarded.
Yeah, quite. And another thing which I find absolutely unacceptable, it absolutely stinks, I think, is that the Americans are always talking about the Free Syrian Army. It's as though, it's the Archangel Gabriel or something. It's,
Well, Glenn, it was said of the Holy Roman Empire that it was neither Holy Roman nor an empire. The Free Syrian Army, increasingly, is not free, is not Syrian, and by the looks of how the military situation has begun to turn over these last weeks, it's not much of an army either. Glenn, thanks for that call. We are talking about Israel. We are talking about Palestine. It is the run-up to the 65th anniversary of the Nakba, the catastrophe that wiped Palestine off the map. Mahmoud is on the line from Sweden on both subjects, Afghanistan and Israel-Palestine. Mahmoud, welcome to the show.
Oh, hi, Judge Galloway. Nice to have me again.
Welcome. Go ahead.
How are you? Good evening, yeah. I want to talk about first Afghanistan and then Israel, Palestine. In Afghanistan, about this war you mentioned before about the blood that was paid by the Afghan people and the tax money that the British paid. Yeah. Which David Cameron is complaining, marketing. I think that you have forgotten something about this heroin, because over 90% of heroin that is used in Britain, America, Europe,
it's coming from there. It's coming from the very area that the British forces have been stationed in for most of the last decade.
Because during Taliban ruling 11 years ago, Mullah Omar issued a fatwa that they shall destroy all these poppy fields.
Yeah, in fact, the Taliban government won an award from the United Nations as the government which had destroyed more drug production in its territory than any other in the world.
Mr. Galloway, we should not forget that 200 years ago, British Empire, they used to play this kind of game, this opium war in China. This game still continues up to this very moment by this terrorist organization calling themselves intelligent, MI6 and CIA. They are the ones who are trying to benefit out of these drugs. And there are many junkies in America and in Britain. So I think also we have problem with these drugs, besides the blood and the tax money.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Blood, treasure, and heroin. It's not much of an achievement in 10 years, Mahmoud.
So things, history repeats itself, and evil will always be dominating the world unless something has to be done. About Palestine.
Yes, quickly. I've got a lot of callers.
I think it's the time now for people to understand that Palestine must be liberated.
Well, indeed, some of us have known that for a long time. It's one thing to say it, Mahmoud. It's another thing to bring it about. Thanks for the call in Sweden. Gary is one of my legends from Halifax, Nova Scotia, in North America, in Canada. Wants to talk about Israel, Palestine. Gary, welcome back.
Good evening, George.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
Well, the 65th anniversary of the Nakba is a very important occasion to recall some facts that are kind of buried in the long history of the Palestinian struggle for self-determination. One of the typical stories that many of us have gotten used to hearing was how the Zionists were just so superior in their handling of arms, in the range of training that they had, thanks to the British, that there was just no real way of stopping them once the mandate ended on May 15th, 1948. That was it. It was basically curtains. The Palestinians were left largely defenseless. They had already started fleeing the towns. After the mandate ended, they started fleeing the villages in large numbers, and so on and so forth. I've been doing some research recently, and I found out some interesting things. What I didn't know before was that there was a very significant Arab League army, before the Arab states sent troops into Palestine after the end of the British mandate. This Arab League army operated from roughly from January 1948 until just before the British mandate ended in May 15th of 1948. And the leading man in that army was a man by the name of Fawzi al-Kawukchi.
Yeah.
He was a very skilled, very experienced soldier, born in what was then Greater Syria, may be part of what is now Lebanon, and he led very skillful campaigns. He actually had the Zionists on the ropes all the way up to very late April 1948. And what happened at the crucial moment in what's known as the Latrun Salient, which is on the road between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and is now in the West Bank. What happened was right at the moment that al-Kawukchi's forces could have really done in the Zionists, the countries that were supposed to send ammunition to resupply al-Kawukchi's forces magically and mysteriously had no ammunition to send. The Zionists rallied. They recaptured the whole Latrun area. Latrun was the key to the whole strategic situation.
Indeed, you're right. And of course, as an earlier caller was saying, Gary, history often repeats itself. And the very same powers, I suppose we'll have to call them, in the Arab arena, who betrayed that great military effort of which you have reminded us so powerfully, are still betraying the Palestinian people today. Indeed, just yesterday, or the day before, they were giving parts of Palestine away without any mandate, without any authority, without any by your leave from anybody. They were with John Kerry giving Palestine away again, or what's left of it at least. The good news, Gary, is that there are many heroes still amongst the Palestinian people, and heroes yet unborn. And the Palestinian people will never agree to their rights being sold or signed away by anybody. Gary, thanks for the call. Osman's in London on the same subject as well as Afghanistan. Osman, welcome.
Thank you, George. Good to talk to you today.
And you, sir. Go ahead.
And I wish you well all the time, because great people like you needs to get more George Galloway in this life who will speak for the voiceless people all the time, George. God bless you.
Thank you, brother.
And I also like to appreciate the work of your technicians in the studio.
They're wonderful. We have a wonderful team here at Press TV, by the grace of God.
Okay. Now, I would like to talk about the Israeli issue concerning the Nakba. You know, the Palestinians, first of all, they have to put aside the differences. I would like to appeal to Mr. Michel and Ismail Haniyeh to put aside everything and look up to what Yasser Arafat left behind, the Fatah leader, and then come together to fight for the liberation of the Palestinians from the Zionist regime.
There needs to be one Palestinian national movement, one PLO, one address, one political line. And that line has to be the defense of the right of return of the Palestinian people to their land and their homes.
And then also the Palestinian leaders, not only about Mr. Barghouti in the prisons, there is thousands of Palestinians in the prisons of the Israeli jails. I would like to ask the international community to look up to this issue, because when they're talking about international law, why is it that some people have been infringed their human rights and they are not taking them to court, and then tonight they still continue talking about international law where others have been infringed? And if it happens to anybody in the Western country, that is the time they'll start to, using the aggressive rhetorics for war, because they are not respecting human rights. So in this juncture, I would like to urge all Palestinians to stand firm, as Arafat was doing during his heydays, and then forge together and then have their land back.
Hallelujah.
From this region.
Hallelujah. Osman, an outstanding call. Don't be a stranger. Stay in touch with us here at Comment on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. As I was saying, we are talking about the Afghan situation, where it's my case that these 3 young Scottish soldiers who died yesterday died for nothing. And they were sent to their deaths by politicians in the British Parliament who are an ironclad consensus in defence of the war that they began. Ed Miliband could only send out some platitudinous condolences for 3 young soldiers whose name he has, I assure you, already forgotten. 3 young soldiers whose parents will never forget them, whose communities from which they sprung and from which they were conscripted, no doubt, by unemployment and poverty and misery and hopelessness in the post-industrial parts of the United Kingdom. For many of these young men, the military is actually the only place where any kind of job or career is possible. And now they're dead, like 441 before them, bringing 444 the number of dead British soldiers. And of course, thousands have been wounded. Many more have been damaged. Many of them will end up in Britain's prison system. Many of them will end up on the streets, homeless, begging off people. Because, of course, once David Cameron has squeezed the last usefulness out of them as foreign soldiers, well, they can go hang, so far as he's concerned. Let's squeeze in Zachary from Aberdeen on Israel. Go ahead, Zachariah.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. George Galloway.
Go on, sir.
Regarding earlier, you said that the Palestinians, they should have unity in their voice and also one
address.
One object.
Yeah.
And that is right after return.
Yeah.
And earlier you said that the Zionists, they wiped out the Palestinian country.
No, they didn't wipe it out. They wiped it off the map.
Yeah.
It still exists,
they
of course.
They wiped out from the map.
Yeah.
But this is the right of the Palestinians to wipe out Israel from the map, and total land of the Palestine is belong to Palestinians. Is not only right to return. No Zionists have a right to exist in Palestine. And
no, I don't agree with that. Jews.
This is human rights.
Well, let me deal with the point that you have made. Jews have always lived in Palestine. Jews have a right to live in Palestine. They just don't have the right to live in somebody else's house, on somebody else's land, from which they not only have not paid the owner for the house and the land, but may have been a party to the driving out of the land of the owner of the house, and that person's miserable 65 years in a refugee camp ever since. So let's agree on one thing. Every Palestinian in the world has the right of return to his home and his land. And I promise you, Zachariah, that'll be the end of the problem if that right is respected. I'll be back shortly, God willing. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. We want your voice here on Comment, the big conversation, the great debate, by phone, by SMS, or by email. We're discussing Israel-Palestine in the run-up to the 65th anniversary of the Nakba, the catastrophe that wiped Palestine off the map, but didn't, unlike the predictions made by Ben-Gurion and others at the time, didn't lead to the forgetting of Palestine, neither by the Palestinians nor by the world. In fact, the world speaks of little else nowadays. Jeff is in England, in Lincolnshire. He wants to talk about the same subject. Jeff, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Welcome, sir. Go
I'll
ahead.
only be brief. I know there's a lot of people on the line.
There is tonight, yes, by the grace of God.
I meant to say, you said something earlier in the show, George, about the Arab League leaders, or some of them, proposing to sell Palestine down.
Yes, the so-called Prime Minister of Qatar, just yesterday, yes.
Yes, well, the manager of the petrol station.
The manager of the petrol. He's not even the manager, he's the deputy manager.
Yes, he's a client.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is that it reminded me, actually, of one of the few pieces of succor that the establishment media took away from the WikiLeaks revelations a few years ago. They saw a lot of hostility and anti-Iran sentiment coming from Arab capitals, and they were so eager and so happy to splash all over the front pages that Iran was so unpopular in the Arab world. You know, these countries supported aggression against Iran. Well, that's true, but only if the people of those Arab countries aren't counted as legitimate members of their own countries.
Quite so.
Because the thing is that a more accurate headline would say unelected despots, the Unelected Despots Club, does not, support. So it's actually quite a...
What a wonderful phrase, Jeff. You should copyright that phrase, or I'll be often using it.
Yes, I mean, it's quite an interesting
The Unelected Despots Club in the Persian Gulf wants rid of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the only place where there actually is any elections.
I know. I mean, it is quite interesting because the prospect of aggression against Iran is actually quite a popular concept among tyrants in the region. And it reminded me that they talk about this as if these unrepresentative leaders have anything to do with the people. You also said something else about touching on the Israel-Palestine issue, about the right of return.
Yeah.
Some people might not be aware, but I'd just like to make it clear. You look at the human rights literature on this issue, and you'll find that the right of the return, which is internationally validated, indeed annually revalidated by the UN, this is not something that can be bargained away.
No. It's inalienable, meaning it will last eternally, whether or not a century or 2 centuries passes. Indeed. The right of return will not be relinquished. It's eternal, legal and moral.
And it can't be bartered away even by representatives of the Palestinian people.
No,
for example,
still less by the manager of the petrol station in Doha.
Certainly not, but even if someone like Mahmoud Abbas were to make a sellout deal to the Israelis and say, OK, we relinquish our right of return if you give us so much land or whatever, that is not acceptable. It's an individual right of every Palestinian.
Indeed.
From
well,
their
look,
home.
Jeff, I was yesterday in Sabra Shatila in Beirut.
Yes.
In Lebanon, there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees who don't come from the West Bank, who don't come from Gaza. They come from Jaffa and Haifa and Akkar. They come from what is so-called Israel today. They have a legal right forever to return to their own land and their own house in those territories. No one can take that right away from them. As you correctly point out, Jeff, wonderful call. You're a great caller. Don't be a stranger. Keep coming back. Idris is in Nigeria. Wants to talk about the same subject. Idris.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, sir. You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm so happy to speak with you again.
Go ahead, Idris.
Okay, I want to talk about the Israelites.
Yes.
Well, I don't know why in the Committee of All Nations, the Israelites, they are above the law. they do as they wish, and nobody will say anything, even the Muslim country altogether, as if we're speechless. Backed by the Western world, they keep terrorizing the Palestinians, taking all the land from them, and it's as if whatever they do, the international community, they are pleased with Israel. And they are projecting to the whole world as if the Palestinians are fighting Christians. Okay,
look, Idris, my sincere apologies to all our friends in Nigeria, but these calls are not working from Nigeria. It is obviously a problem with the line. Ahmed is on the line from Tehran on Afghanistan. Ahmed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. George Galloway. Hello and good night.
Good evening. Go ahead.
As you know, dear George Galloway, in 2014, the ISAF, our plan supposedly to leave the region, or at least leave the Afghanistan, which I think this will not happen. But I want to tell them that by supporting the Al-Qaeda extremism in the region, and these monies which are going to nowhere, and nobody knows that who is after this, who is behind this Al-Qaeda supporting. When the ISAF forces decide to leave the Afghanistan territory, everybody knows that they are going to pass the Pakistani soil and reach the free water gate near the ocean. Okay. Approximately, I guess, more than 100,000 containers are going to carry the infrastructures of the American forces and their allies through the Pakistani soil. So what would happen in 2014 when in a very short period of time this large amount of cargoes, military cargoes, are going to pass through a region?
Well, let me just give you one taste of what they hope will happen. In this very day, the Taliban opened an official political office. Where else but Doha in Qatar? The Qatar government invited them to. And that's obviously where they're hoping to negotiate their retreat from Afghanistan in good order. If it's not in good order, as you were implying in your lead up there, the potential for chaos is cataclysmic, because if 100,000 containers and scores of thousands of soldiers all try to leave over a very short period of time under fire, well, the capacity for it ending up looking like the retreat of the United States from Saigon in what was then South Vietnam is obvious. Jimson is on the line. He's in Cameroon. Let's hope the lines to Cameroon are better than to Nigeria. Jimson, welcome.
Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir. Welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank you for the courage you have to be able to speak for the voiceless. And I have this worry I'm going to talk to you today about concerning the Israeli-Palestinian issue.
Tell me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air, sir.
Okay. I want to believe that the Americans, as they have proven beyond reasonable doubt, is they are the superpowers of the world. And they are friends to the Israelis.
Yeah.
And I understand from every standpoint of an American, the trust in God. That is the permanent statement in the mouth of every American, including the president. What is happening that the same God cannot help them to be able to find a solution for people who are armless, the people who are speechless, and they are dying every day, even on the eve and the day before the president visits these people. Where is the problem? Which God are we talking about? George, I want you to help me.
Well, there is only one God, and God gave us the ability to do good and to do evil. Each of us has that possibility. And it's a struggle between good and evil. And there's a judgment day in which all of us will face the ultimate judgment as to what we did with the life that God gave us. I hope I heard you properly, Jimson, but the line, I'm afraid, to Africa just ain't good this evening. We're talking about Israel-Palestine. We're talking about Afghanistan. 3 young Scottish soldiers were killed yesterday. David Cameron says, we have paid a high price in Afghanistan. Well, not as high as the people of Afghanistan. And in any case, it's not David Cameron's children who are dying in these British uniforms and in the uniforms of the United States or other ISAF participants. In fact, I'm willing to bet that there's not 5 sons of any politicians in any of the Western countries currently serving in any kind of danger in Afghanistan. I'm willing to bet that because I know these people. I've been sitting amongst them for 25 years in the British Parliament. I know that they're always ready to fight to the last drop of somebody else's blood. They're ready to send somebody else's son to project their power in the former corners of the empire. So, David Cameron, you didn't pay any price. It was we who paid it in treasure. It was the families of the fallen who've paid it in blood. And the rest of society has had to pay for the extremization, the fanaticization that you and your predecessors and Obama and his predecessors have unleashed upon the world. You didn't pay anything, Mr. Cameron. We are the ones who are paying. Adam's on the line in London on this very subject, Afghanistan. Adam, welcome to the show. Good to hear from you again.
Thank you very much, George. It's been a while.
Yes.
I was contemplating writing to you in the House of Commons. That has been a long time that has spoken.
Yeah. Well, it's better now. You can talk to me in front of the whole world.
That's it. You are doing a wonderful job. Hope many intellectuals will follow your program.
Thanks.
And will be able to salvage the situation. It's getting worse. This is breeding in-house terrorists that we are seeing across the globe. Just recently what happened in America. Because there is no justice. If there is no justice, there will never be peace. Cool. What is happening in Afghanistan? Afghanistan is a sovereign nation which has been held ransom for the past 100 years by the British. The Russians went there. America clandestinely fought the British, and they did not appease those whom they used to fight the Russians in Afghanistan. And they empowered section of people within the community as a result of poverty and has increased the amount of killings in Afghanistan. The British foreign policies in Afghanistan is not right. It is not good. It's high time the taxpayers stood up to the government and say that there is nobody in Afghanistan that will come to England to come and fight us.
No, they've no intention of harming us, Adam. No Afghan ever harmed us. No Afghan ever committed any act of terrorism against us. The people who were operating as terrorists in Afghanistan were sent to Afghanistan by us. Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden, they were all sent to Afghanistan by us. We punished the Afghans by sending them there in the first place. And now we're punishing the Afghans because they were there after we sent them. You couldn't make it up, Adam. Younger listeners, viewers, might not know what I'm talking about. But this is the facts that you and I know. No Afghan ever harmed us. No Afghan wants to harm us. No Afghan is remotely concerned with how we live our lives in London or in Stockholm or Amsterdam. They just want the foreign armies out of their country. And who can blame them for that. Craig's on the line in London on Israel-Palestine. Craig, welcome. Craig, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, George. Yeah, how are you?
Very well, brother. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say something. The Jews have been persecuted in Europe for many years.
Yep.
Because of one thing. They have been kicked out from their God-given land, which God gave them according to the Bible.
Uh-huh.
And the Muslims kicked them out of their land.
The Muslims kicked them out of their land. When was that?
I think it was a time of one of the companions of the Prophet. He invaded Israel and kicked out all the Jews.
No, tell me who that was. Tell me who that was and when.
It was 1,400 years ago.
No. You said it was in the Bible. So give me the biblical authority for the nonsense that you're talking.
It was God-given.
I think you realize by now, Craig, that you've made a fool of yourself, because of course the Bible was written before Islam was brought to the world. Therefore, no Muslim can possibly have been involved in anything that is in the Bible. You see, a little knowledge is dangerous, Craig, and it's especially dangerous on live TV, especially when your adversary is me. You see, God is not an estate agent. He didn't give anybody the right to kick anybody out of their house, out of their land, call it something else, and allow any person who decides to become a Jew to go and live in his house in his stead. I could become a Jew this evening. I would ipso facto, according to the constitution of what they call Israel, have the right to go and live in Palestine, in a Palestinian's house, on Palestinian land. If you're telling me that God, the merciful, the all-powerful, would ever be responsible for such an injustice, you obviously know a different God to me. Craig, go and brush up on your Bible, son, before you come back and try and argue with me on television. We are talking, though, about today. We're talking about the attacks today on the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. We are talking about Afghanistan today and what is going to happen between now and 2014, when the so-called ISAF is due to withdraw from the country. Some ask what that will look like. I think it will look like May Day of 1975, the rooftop of the American embassy in Saigon, the ambassador scrambling desperately into the helicopter, the Vietnamese people rushing up the stairs to try and pull his helicopter down out of the sky, the occupier leaving all of its hirelings and collaborators to their fate, not even giving them passports so that they can go and join the people who are now escaping out of harm's way. That's what I think it's going to look like. But it might not. They may make a negotiation through the new Taliban office in Doha, in Qatar. Amal is on the line in Wolverhampton. Wants to talk about both these subjects. Amal, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway.
Good evening, madam.
I'd like to speak about the current situation about Palestine and the country called herself Israel. Mr. Galloway, first of all, Israel is a crazy country. It's like a junk. Every few years they have to go to war. 2003 was in Iraq, 2006 was in Lebanon, 2008 and 9 was Gaza, 2012 was Gaza again. And
but they lost in 2006, and they certainly didn't win in Gaza. In fact, in the 8-day war, just recently, they were scared to set foot inside Gaza.
Yes, Mr. Galloway, but they are junk and they need a fix. They are lunatics. But let me talk about the Palestinian. Mr. Galloway, we love the Palestinian. We do and want to see a Palestinian state. But sorry to say that, Mr. Galloway, the will of the Palestinian people is not there. Don't say the Arab, don't say the Muslim, don't say the earth, don't say the nation, but what I'm talking is as a Palestinian. The Palestinian will is not there. They are fighting with each other, Hamas and Fatah, Palestinian to Palestinian. They are not sovereign enough. If the Palestinians are willing really to go and to have a country called Palestine, I think 5 million Palestinians, if they march wherever they are, in Gaza, in Palestine, in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Syria, at least 1,000 or maybe 100,000 will be dead. A friend of mine said to me, it is impossible. You cannot remove Mubarak. Mubarak is removed. And I believe if they work, the Palestinian, because this Al-Quds, Mr. Galloway, I'm not really going to will again for the Palestinian because there is no will for the Palestinian. They don't have no country, but they do not know what to decide. We cannot decide for them. They have to march. Then we will march after them.
Well, that's a very powerful and emotional call. It's certainly true that the Palestinian national movement is deeply divided. Just last evening, after I left the camp in Shatila, there was a problem between Palestinian factions in the camp. And breaking on the news this evening on Press TV, there's a serious explosion in Ain al-Hilwi camp outside of Beirut, and which has caused many, many injuries. The Palestinian people are divided, and that's why I said earlier, they have to unite with one address, with one set of demands. Let's squeeze Mixon in from Malawi, just because I haven't had Malawi on the line for a while. Quickly, Mixon, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you, George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you. I wanted to give a comment on the Palestinians. I don't know why the Americans...
What a pity. Look, Mixon, you'll need to come back next week because I needed 60 crisp seconds from you, but the telephone lines have frustrated us to Africa all evening. I've been George Galloway. This has been Comment, and of course, this is Press TV. It remains the voice of the voiceless. God willing, I'll be back here next Thursday, same time, same place. Join me. Bring someone else with you.
Hello, if you comment, take the name and the place you left that number. And just make sure about your television volume set to 0. So, 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me through the phone number and then we'll call you back. Comment? Can I have your telephone number? Okay, so I'll send you the comment after this. If you call me back, can you make sure